We'd like to call out to the stage Larry Karaszewski and Scott Alexander. Nate Cohen and I are going to present the Golden Thumbs. We have a tradition here of presenting the Golden Thumbs. We tried to get Tony Clifton to do it, but he was busy tonight.
Thumb
Larry,
bums rum.
I'd like to present you with a Golden Thumb.
Oh, thank you. Oh my God, it's so heavy.
It is.
It's a heavy thumb.
And Scott?
Wow.
Thank you, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
That actually has our names on it already. Already engraved. Thank you.
And we're going to take them back, and we're going to call out Brian Tellerico and Todd Rindelman to come join us on stage.
All right, cool.
And will
There's
you two take the two middle
the middle?
seats, please?
All right. Not sure which ones are middle seats. But this is yeah, it's all chairs. That's a lot of moderators out here.
Oh, wait. The other chairs or? Oh, Chaz.
Chaz is coming back.
Okay.
My big question when they invited us here was like, is the thumb a carry-on item? You know, it's like you could kill somebody with that thumb.
I'd like to start off just by talking about you two. You met in film school,
Yeah.
and you've been together ever since.
Yeah.
How long is that, and how is that process? I've been watching you all week here. Your personalities are so radically different. I'm wondering what a writer's room is like with you two.
Well, it's really funny. Every once in a while, we'll meet like writing partners, and they're kind of the same entity. And I think what makes Scott and I really work is there is a yin and yang going on. It's like, 1 + 2 = 7 or something, because it's like, I'd say like we don't always agree on things, but that makes the writing go to some other level that we can agree on. So it isn't like, I think that's why our scripts tend to be kind of unusual, because it isn't, a lot of times if you're writing by yourself, you just go for the thing that's easiest, and since we battled everything out, it's sort of the creation becomes a little stranger, a little more off the wall. How we met, I think.
We met first day of school, freshman dorm, while we were in line getting our food cards. And that was 1981.
Wow.
And then senior year, we had an idea for a movie, so we thought we would write it just to see what would happen. And it turned out funny, and then we sold it 2 weeks after graduating. And we didn't have a game plan, just things happened.
Yeah, I don't think we ever really planned initially that we were going to be writing partners for the rest of our lives, but one thing kept on leading to another, and we've been very, very lucky that for the most part we've been working ever since. And we're slow, so we always are one job behind. So we have to keep putting things out because we owe people jobs.
So what school was it?
USC. Scott's from Los Angeles, and I'm from Indiana.
Can you discuss your process a little bit, like what the research process is like and how it's changed? I was thinking like your early films must have been a little harder now in the days of everything being on your phone, on Google and stuff. Like the research process must have evolved a little bit over the last 25, 30 years you've been doing this.
Yeah, I mean, it has really changed. Ed Wood had very little research because there was very little out there.
Yeah.
And we wrote that on our own. When we did Larry Flint, we set it up with a studio, and there was no such children. There was no such thing as Google. there was no internet to type into. But there was something called Nexus Lexis that lawyers would use, and we became friends with all the studio lawyers. And they said, "What do you need?" We said, "We need every article ever written in the New York Times, Washington Post, Time and Newsweek." Well, Time and Newsweek, these were magazines. A long time ago. So that's how we did a lot of that research. I mean, like I said before, on this one, there was hardly anything written on Andy, and we interviewed people for about half a year.
Yeah, I would say the first 3 or 4 movies we did were on very kind of pop culture blips kind of people, like Andy Kaufman and Larry Flint and Ed Wood, and so there wasn't really material out there. So we had to act like journalists, really. We'd spend sometimes like 4 or 5 months just out there, like actually interviewing people and talking to people and looking things up, and so we had to like actually, work that before we even got to the screenplay process.
And then how do those interviews become a script? Do you say, oh, this is an interesting story, we should include that? Or are you just kind of learn about a person and then develop the script out of that?
What's interesting is I think, and particularly in the early days more so, we pretty much kind of knew our structure. We knew, we sort of almost worked from the end.
I mean, we knew the beginning and the end.
Yeah. So, henceforth, when we're doing the research, we're doing research in order to plug things in. Like we always, I think one of the key things we do when we do these true life stories, we ask the question, why will this person be remembered? And in the case of Ed Wood, it was, he made the worst movie of all time, and he had sort of like gotten really close with Bela Lugosi. It was like Bela and him were almost like a love story. And so that's what the movie was. The movie ended with him, his triumph in making the worst movie of all time. And here Andy will be remembered for the fact that he, when he died, no one believed that he actually died. And where he was a guy who turned, comedy into performance art and punk rock in a weird way. So that's, once you answer those kind of questions, the structure kind of falls into place. You know when to get out. Because one thing, we actually, for people who make biopics, we hate biopics. We're not like, we don't subscribe to the sort of 3-hour, he was born here, they did this, they conquered this, and it's the, the Gandhi school of biopics. That's not really what we do.
Yeah, a lot of the research is we don't really know what's going to go in the script. And so, those months and months of, like talking to Andy's family, and we had all these stories about Andy in high school, and Andy doing magic shows in junior high school, and Andy starring in Heart Beeps when he played a robot. And this is stuff we learned a lot about. Right. But at the time, we don't really know what's going to get into the movie. And then we're making up binders, and it's like, childhood in Long Island, high school days, obsession with Elvis Presley. It's just chapters of information.
And sometimes people say, well, why don't you hire someone to do the research for you? And you can't really do that because then they know the information and you don't. We have to do the research ourselves so we know the information backwards and forwards. And also, particularly, we have a very eccentric sense of humor. And so what we kind of circle and think is important, a lot of people wouldn't normally think is important. Like the O.J. Simpson thing, that series is full of just little things that we were like, this is really unusual. This is the fact that during the Bronco chase is actually, Pizza Parlor's biggest night of sales ever. And so, we include, you cut to a pizza parlor running out of cheese in the middle of a chase. We thought that was funny, and that actually said a lot, the fact that people were, glued to their televisions that night. And so normally people wouldn't have circled that.
So and then learning all this endless data, and afterwards we're saying to each other, well, does that sound like it can be plot? Yeah. So if we're talking to Andy's friend Little Wendy, and she's the one, she plays herself, and a lot of people play themselves. She's like the little one with the chipmunk voice, who's hanging around, and she told us the story about Andy being kicked out of Transcendental Meditation, and so we were thinking, oh, that can work as plot. Because he's being too rude in Memphis, and now the TM people are angry at him. So it's like we're trying to take the facts and then tell a tale.
And we did something really unusual in this movie that we tried to take Andy's routines. A lot of these routines are just all throughout his career. Take his routines and use his routines to tell the story. Like every placement of every act, part of his act, is done to tell about kind of it's almost like a Broadway musical. They're the songs. They're the songs that reveal character and reveal plot. And so we try to use his routines in order to tell the story of his life.
And it adds to the theme that he was really only a stage persona. Correct. Like there is nothing other than the routines.
Yes.
It's funny when sometimes you meet an actor, you meet a performer or a comedian. A lot of times with comedians, they talked about Peter Sellers this way, where there's no there. where they only live to be a performer. And when we talked about this movie with Milos was really intrigued by the idea that the movie is really that the audience is the antagonist. That in a sense he cast all those extras, and he spent so much time with the audience in the movie because that was the person that Andy had the most interaction at. And we often, I think when they introduced us, they used the term that we sort of came up with, the anti-biopic, but this one really is an anti-biopic, and because we always joked with Milos that you know less about Andy Kaufman at the end of the movie than you did coming in. When you went in, you were like, oh yeah, I know Andy Kaufman, he was on Taxi, this, and at the end you're like, I don't know anything about this guy.
And one of the things that I love about your writing is you take these eccentric characters and you actually have an affection for them. It seems like in your writing, you don't make fun of them. You really, you do find that kernel of whatever it is that makes them tick, and which I think made the movies brilliant. Ed Wood, for instance, and even in the People versus Larry Flint. And also in Dolomite is Still My Name. I think that's the name of it. Did you find in your research that Andy Kaufman really thought he was creating a whole new genre that people should really understand and find really funny?
Yeah, I mean, it's like we say in the movie. He wanted to get a reaction, and we watched so much obscure stuff, and George had saved a lot of home videos Andy had made, and so we watched these tapes. They weren't broadcast. It was Andy at 2 a.m. at the Improv, doing his laundry on stage, and it's Andy just reading a magazine while a washing machine on stage is rolling around, and you can just sort of hear the people in the crowd grumbling. And he wants people to go home and then talk about this experience they had. Did they enjoy themselves? Probably not. Well, is it memorable? Yeah.
Well, one of the things too that we would talk to Milos about is that it's every performer and every comedian's fear is bombing, is being a failure on stage, is to do something and get a bad reaction. And Andy subverted that by working failure into the act, that failure was his act. So whatever, if you laugh, that was great, but if you boo too, that's even better. And if you walk out, that's a home run. So he managed to turn the whole idea, and that's where I think he really became a performance artist, it was about the performance on stage was in quotation marks.
Yeah, and he grew up on Long Island, and he'd gone into the city, and growing up in the early '70s and the late '60s, and it's like that era of the worn out stand-up comedian in the crappy little nightclub who's introducing the stripper who's going to come out next, and it's just like this low rung of showbiz, and he loves these guys, and then Tony sort of represented the ideal of just that fallen entertainer who really isn't very good, but he loves what he does.
And you mentioned the fact that we have such sympathy for all these characters, and we sort of fall in love with these characters. I mean, I think that's a great example of that is the People versus OJ, where our whole thing was, we feel like OJ's not the main character in that show. The real characters are Johnny Cochran, they're Marsha Clark, they're Chris Darden, and all three of those people we felt were sometimes really villainized by the public, particularly during that trial, and we wanted you to, regardless of what you felt about OJ's guilt, really get under the skin of those people, and you understand that Johnny Cochran's motives were sincere. You understand with the position Chris Darden was in that show as that Marsha Clark, which she went through as the female in the middle of this thing. So it's like these people, if you went into that show thinking you hate Marsha Clark, you came out of that show kind of at least understanding where she was coming from.
Yeah, I mean, we really do we have to have affection for these people, or we don't want to spend 2 years dealing with them. Yeah, and I think a lot of it is, particularly with the early films, and that we were obsessing over these somewhat obscure people that we were tickled by, and we sort of want to make a case for them. So we want our audience to kind of enjoy them as much as we do. And then a good sign of how highly regarded Andy was by everyone in his life. I mean, as annoying as he was, is look how many people from his world play themselves in the movie.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's
I
like
noticed
Lorne
that.
Michaels and Letterman and the cast of Taxi. It's like everyone came back. Jerry Lawler was awesome. Coming back and putting up with all this nonsense again.
And because Jim never broke character, Jim made Jerry Lawler's life a living hell when we were making this movie. He treated Jerry Lawler like a real villain. He would invite Jerry Lawler out to dinner and then not show up. And Jerry Lawler would be sitting in some restaurant in Los Angeles, like, you know, some really fancy place, and just sit there for 2 hours and this.
Wasn't Jim like up in a window throwing eggs at him?
Yeah, at one point, when Lawler would arrive on the set, he would throw eggs at him. I mean, it was, if you ever see it, there's a documentary on Netflix called Jim and Andy, which talks all about the what everyone went through on making this film, because Jim did
So
not.
ridiculous.
Jim never broke character on the film. If it was an Andy Kaufman.
Give me a break.
He was Andy and he was Tony. I mean, the only thing that documentary doesn't do right is that everyone was in on it. There was a joyful feeling about it. It was that you were literally experiencing what it was like to be with Andy Kaufman during this whole making of this film.
I feel like George sort of stands in for the audience in
Yes.
this film in some ways. And at one point he said, "You're insane, but you might actually be a genius." And I wondered if
That
that
line's probably too on the nose. But continue.
did you feel like that was a kind of a guiding theme in the movie's tone, in the tone of your script and its attitude?
Yeah, I think it was, but I will agree with Scott. Every time that line comes on, I go, ooh, that's a little too much for me. But yes, we're very mean to our own work. We love our work, but we also like when we don't like something, we are very.
We spent a lot of time with the real George, and George just adored Andy. So I mean, when you hang out with George, he loved everything about it. So we were really, and Danny's great. I mean, in terms of him just being so supportive of this madness.
It's a great performance from Danny too. I think he's really good.
Yeah, because Andy was a total outlier. I mean, Howard and George, all their other clients were just total straight ahead, working funny people.
Are there any great Andy stories you can remember that didn't make the cut, or that you wish you could have included somehow?
Oh, lots.
I don't know. The whole Fridays thing went on forever, and at a certain point, he becomes born again.
He gets married to
He gets
a Christian
married to
girl.
a Christian woman, and basically the Fridays episodes are just him singing Christian songs in a suit, and it's like what the hell? It really goes completely off the rails. But we love that section. When we write very long. We sort of include everything, and then we whittle it down to the actual film itself.
Can I ask you about Milos Forman?
Yes.
Absolutely. You can ask him about me.
Okay. I just wonder about these Middle European directors and who come to the States to make movies, and how they see Americana, how they see American culture. I mean, what's that all about? I mean, you look at some of Herzog's stuff, you look at Milos Forman's movies. I mean,
Even John Schlesinger in Midnight Cowboy. I'm a big believer in outsiders having a different take on something. A lot of times, even today, that you feel like it has to come from people who know that certain worlds. And I think sometimes outsiders, like Milos coming to America, he's American in a completely different way. And I think that's one of the things, particularly, he really was attracted to the Larry Flint script, was that because he lived through both the Nazis and the communists, and he knew how what freedom of the press truly meant, and how lucky he was to live in America in a place where someone like Larry Flint, had for as disgusting as he was, he had the right to publish his stuff.
Everything is autobiographical, and all of Milos's movies are about outsider anarchists. You got McMurtry and Cuckoo's Nest. You got Salieri and Amadeus. You got Hair. Our movies. So Milos was very attracted to that loud voice in the corner.
But of course, his Czech movies were not quite like that. There was something that happened to him when he crossed the water.
Yeah, Fireman's Ball has a bit of it.
But you know, they just seem to be attracted to the oddities and to the really Americana kind of.
Yeah. Well,
I mean, Milos was really attracted to people who were giving the finger to the system.
Correct.
That's what he's about. And then that is a response to what happened with his family in Czechoslovakia.
And I think one of the reasons we were the people who really pushed me for the studio to offer it to Milos Forman, because he had not made a movie in several years.
On Larry Flint.
On Larry Flint, yeah, on Larry Flint. And they sort of asked us, well, why do you guys want Milos Forman to direct your movies? And we said because of his mastery of tone, that I think our scripts are both dramas and funny. And I don't think there's anyone who does that better than Milos. Once again, to bring up again One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, I mean, that's probably the best example of something that where you're just laughing your head off, and the next minute you're kind of crying, or the next minute you're shocked, or it's just like he can take you through that, because that is sort of how he sees life, and that is actually what life is. And so he's a master.
And what was really fun with Milos, you know, I mean, he's a world-class filmmaker, and he's got 2 Best Pictures, so, you know, he's really good at what he does. But he was not afraid of big, dumb jokes. And this was always a problem we had when we were working on more studio projects or doing rewrites on people's projects, and with less secure directors. If we throw in a big, stupid joke, which makes us laugh, the directors get nervous. Like it's going to wreck the tone, or it's going to be too silly. And Milos wasn't afraid of jokes. He could make the jokes play real.
Have you targeted anyone, who do you have in your sights now that you would like to write about?
Well, our current project right now is we're writing a movie about the Grateful Dead for Martin Scorsese.
Oh.
So that is our thing right now, with Jonah
There's
Hill.
a
as
deadhead
Jimmy
over there.
Garcia.
Okay.
There is a guy wearing a dead shirt, I believe.
Oh, really?
Yeah, yeah. So that's our thing.
Hopefully that becomes a real movie.
Yes.
And you were going to make a Village People movie, weren't you? I heard this story.
We never actually wrote the Village People movie, but we did at one point.
We tried to.
Yeah, we went and met the. It was really more about the 2 French guys who created the Village People.
Sorry, Village People fans.
Sorry, Village People.
It would have been
We still
good.
have it, who knows?
I can go, sure. I'm curious.
Yes, Brian.
I love those awkward moments there.
When you have 4 moderators.
Yeah,
no one knows
exactly.
where to
That's
go.
what happens. How overly concerned are you with truth? Like, if it feels right, but it isn't exactly what happened. I love at the beginning of this one where he's kind of like, well, this is kind of what happened, but not really what happened. Like, how much does that concern you when you're writing a movie?
Here's the thing. We love the truth. It's really I think what makes us stay in this genre is the truth is stranger than fiction. For us, the truth is kind of like the Trojan horse that allows us to do things that like movies don't usually do. And, you know, pretty much everything in our movies happened. Sometimes it's not in the same order. And particularly, you know, certainly like something like The People versus OJ, there are people out there who just would call you on any bullshit that actually occurs. So you almost have to, you know, you have to really be on your toes. So everything happened, but it's a matter about how you can figure out how to shape it as drama. And that's where I think a lot of people make their mistakes, is because they just put in things because they happen. It's all about what you leave out. You're taking someone's life and turning it into 2 hours. And, you know, and so that's where people tend to say, oh, you're lying, or you left something out. You're like, you didn't say anything about his second wife, or something like this. It's like, well, no, we skipped the second wife, you're correct. And we skipped those 7 years he lived in Brazil. You know, just whatever, I'm just making stuff up now, but it's like, you have to shape it in a way that it feels like a dramatic movie, but you can do that including most of the real things that happen.
Yeah, I mean, we make ourselves crazy trying to shove in as much real stuff as we can. I mean, like the the first scene where Danny and Jim go out for dinner. I mean, I was just laughing watching that scene because it's just a greatest hits of Andy Kaufman shtick that we had written down. We're like, all right, he's going to eat health food. Okay, he's going to compulsively wash his hands. Okay, he's going to have fake boogers. Okay, he's going to tell him he wants to be a song and dance man. These are all just things we had on lists. And it's like, hey,
Carnegie Hall.
he wants to play Carnegie Hall. We got them all into one scene. Now, like when the very end, yes, Andy did go to the Philippines with Samuda and with Lynn. That all really happened. We added Andy laughing at the end. That was us. In truth, Andy came back from the Philippines depressed. But we thought, oh wow, this is the story coming full circle.
Right.
This is Andy gets the joke at the end. He's been scammed too,
Right.
and he thinks it's good.
And also, we when we do these people, sometimes we really like to make the movie feel like the person's art itself. Like Ed Wood sometimes feels like an Ed Wood movie. This feels like an Andy Kaufman. The audience is being tricked and fooled, and you know, so that's Dolomite at times feels like a Rudy Ray Moore picture.
So you know, sometimes they say that some writers in Hollywood are not treated that well, but you two have a great reputation, and whenever I hear people talk about you as a writing duo, it's always in a very complimentary way. Do you get to stay on this, when the movies are being made, are you there every day and they're consulting with you, or what happens when it's?
I mean, we tend to get treated very well, particularly on these biopics. I mean, frankly, we aren't really needed once they start shooting. None of our movies have been runaway productions.
Right.
So by the first week of production, the script is locked.
But
So if we want to like come into the set, it's generally like, yeah, come to the set, come hang out. But at that point, we're just hanging out.
But I do think what makes us different than regular writers and what made us kind of embrace this genre was because the subjects that we've picked are fairly obscure. Often we're the experts, and it's not as easy to bring in other writers, or when actors have questions, a lot of times the directors don't know. We're sort of the Doris Kearns Goodwin of whatever subject matter we are.
Of Dolomite.
So of Dolomite, correct.
Ooh, well.
And so, but it actually works so much in our favor because, you know, Tim Burton will say, what did Tor Johnson's house look like? Oh, can you talk to the production designer? We would meet
And
with
nobody else knows the answer.
yeah, and or even like meeting with Ruth Carter about the costumes, or you know, it's happened time and time again. Or an actor, and it even goes all the way down the line when the movies are released. We tend to be almost the only writers in Hollywood who are almost 100% on the junket, like sitting at the table with the actors and the director, because you guys, the critics here, will ask some question. And, ooh, was that true? Scott and Larry. It's almost like this weird, so we are included in the process because we know where the bodies are buried.
I am just thinking back in terms of just being on the set. I think this movie had my favorite memory of being on a set, which was the Rockettes Mormon Tabernacle Choir, Santa Claus flying through the sky. I was at the theater when they were shooting that, and I was just thinking, how did we pull this off? Yeah. This is insane. Why is Universal spending $50 million right now? They're crazy.
I would say that moment is almost on every one of our movies. We're like, oh, wow, how did we fool people into making this one?
They really had Santa on wires flying.
So I have sort of it's kind of like a Siskel and Ebert type question. You two have worked together for so long, you work so well together, but are you actually friends? Do you hang out or socialize together?
We had drinks before the movie.
Yes, we did.
Does that count?
Yeah.
He bought me a Bloody Mary.
Yes, I did.
Or maybe that's not a fair question to ask.
Well, no,
let me tell you why I'm asking.
Well, we're together
Because
every day.
I can't be around Scott. Everything he does is funny to me. He just everything.
Thank you, Chaz.
He's okay. He's fine.
Well, Gene and Roger didn't have to hang out 8 hours a day every day of the week.
Right.
They get together for taping day.
Right. So people ask when we're friends. I mean, I see Scott more than anybody. He is my friend. That being said, like, we work all day, so it's not like, hey, what are you doing tonight? Hey, let's have dinner.
Goodbye.
Yeah, no, we run to our cars.
I was just wondering because
Sometimes
in the
he
beginning,
leaves
for
the office, he
years-
doesn't even say goodbye. I'll just be typing, I'll look up, and he's gone.
Well, you guys weren't working for a lot of last year. When Chaz was asking about writers being treated well, I thought we might get into the fact that, Scott, I know you were very active in the strike. I saw an interview or two
Yes.
with you. So, like, can you speak a little bit about...
Yeah. Writers Guild board.
Yeah, so can you speak a little bit about the state of the industry and what you went through last year and what you fought and what you won?
Things are going great. It's swell out there.
Help!
Help me.
It's hard. I mean, the strike is really about TV writers. It definitely. I mean, we're feature guys. I mean, sadly, there's hardly any movies made anymore. So like 75-80% of the Writers Guild are now in TV, and so it was really a lot of writers fighting for just being able to make a living on a show. Because when you guys watch a show on, there's some gray hairs here. When you used to watch a show 20 years ago, 30 years ago, there would be 24 episodes. If you watch Dallas, there'd be 24 episodes a year. So the writers would get paid. They would work a full year on that season. And now if you watch a show on Netflix, there's 8 episodes. And so the writers basically have to hustle, try to get hired to work on that show that's only going to work this long, and then it's going to stop. And now they have to go look for their next job. And so that's what a lot of the strike was about, and like just people being able to make a living through the whole year. So hopefully the streamers will keep making products so people can make a living.
And then what your separate projects, like Larry, I know that you are very involved with film preservation. Is this something that you do?
Oh, I
as well?
hate film.
Every time I turn around, he's lighting movies on fire. It's like, what's wrong with you? Well, no, I mean, actually, it was funny. We were talking about the Writers Guild. Scott is on the board of the Writers Guild. I was on the board of the Academy. We sort of like leave our little kingdoms separate, separate our kingdoms a bit. I do a lot of work with the American Cinematheque.
My
and
kingdom.
Scott does a lot of work with the Writers Guild, programming films of the Writers Guild. We sort of do our own thing.
What do you do that annoys him, and what do you do that annoy each other?
He needs too much attention. It's exhausting.
And he just exists for Joyce, because that's just really, just him being alive really makes me mad. Breathing.
Love me, I'm Larry.
I took a picture outside with Roger. I took a cool picture, and I sent it to him. He's like, "How many places have you posted this already?" You know, he hates me. What? He posted one too. Yes, he did. He copies me.
Finally.
Fact. Tries to catch up.
Can we get the microphones going in the audience?
It's an
Because
angry
we have
crowd.
To have audience participation.
Segue.
It went off the
Do
rails
we
a
have the
long time.
microphones?
This is funnier than the Star 80 Q&A, right?
I have a question to your left.
Yes, thank you. You mentioned that you classify your films as anti-biopics and how you hate conventional biopics, and it seems like Hollywood is making more conventional biopics now more than ever, and I was wondering if you could talk about your take on the current state of the genre.
I mean, I think Hollywood is, in the last 10, 15 years, has been making a lot of our kind of movies, sort of celebrating quirky underdogs. So a little bit of that is we feel good about, and part of it is annoying. Sort of like, hey, they stole our act.
Right. There's something called the Blacklist, which is like a collection of unproduced screenplays that people in town have voted on, saying they're the best unproduced screenplays. And there was a certain period where, I don't want to pat ourselves on the back, but it felt like 15 to 20% of those screenplays were kind of Scott and Larry movies, whether it was a Jim Henson bio or a Madonna bio, and Scott is correct that we sort of paved the way for movies about Tanya Harding and that kind of thing. So it's sort of that people can make a biopic now about more unconventional subjects.
Though there was one Blacklist script that we heard about and we said, oh wow, that one actually sounds pretty good. And we read it, and it was about Michael Jackson's chimpanzee.
Yeah, Bubbles.
Bubbles. It's such a great script, and we tried to get Tim Burton to direct the movie. We love this script, but it never got made.
It was all narrated by Bubbles. The king came home today. It was like a Werner Herzog kind of thing.
Yes,
it was amazing.
It's so good.
One of the best showbiz stories ever. I'm not going to go into it too long, but we spent the day with Michael once, and one of the greatest things ever happened was that he looked at Scott and he sang "Pure Imagination" from Willy Wonka in Scott's eyes.
It was so sweet.
I have a question up by front of the house, please.
Where am I looking?
Over here.
Stage
Right up
left?
here.
Stage right?
Doesn't matter. I can hear.
Stage middle.
There you are.
Thank you guys so much. I imagine that you have like binders of materials, and where does all that go after you're done with it? Like, I know you're not historians or anything like that, but like, if you're the authority on a person like Andy Kaufman, where does all that stuff go when you're done?
In boxes.
It's a lot are in my attic.
Yeah, I mean, I believe it'll eventually go to the Academy Library. I mean, when I was the Vice President of History and Preservation, I was kind of in charge of the library. So at some point, we will pack up all that stuff in a box and probably donate it there. And they are really big volumes. I mean, and they're all, the key thing about doing all that research is you also have to be able to find that research. That's the key, because you can do research, but if you all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, where's that? What kind of car? What color was Johnny Cochran's car? And you can't find that. You have to be able to, like, as you put it in those binders, or now you have searchable things on the computer. But back in the old days when you used binders, you had to mark it well enough that you could find out, like, Larry Flint's childhood, Larry Flint, the early days of Hustler, Larry Flint, his first arrest. So you could go right to that.
Yeah, I mean, now having a searchable PDF has made it so much easier. I mean, back when we were writing Ed Wood, and we wrote it really fast, and I just remember one day saying, what color was Criswell's Cadillac? And then just like going through notebooks, trying to find this stupid fact, and now a searchable PDF, boom, it's there.
But that being said, there's something to having less stuff. Before we would have, a few books or some articles and magazine things, because, you didn't. Right now, when we do a biopic, it's one search gives you everything about this person, volumes and volumes and volumes and volumes. Something like the O.J. Simpson trial or the Grateful Dead project. You can't believe how much information is there. Court transcripts, or in the case of the dead, every single moment in the dead's life has been documented by people, and so there's almost too much information. You're almost overwhelmed. It actually takes much longer than it did before.
Oh, you know what we didn't ask?
Please.
Who thought of having Jim Carrey portray Andy Kaufman, and did you have to give him any specific, did he want to confer with you about anything about his performance?
Well,
Because he knew that you did all this research.
this particular movie was a wacky casting in that it was like the search for Scarlett O'Hara. And that we finished the script, we had a good first draft, Universal said they're gonna make the movie, and it's Milos directing, and word got out. And every guy in town who was like between 30 and 45 was waving his hand. And all these famous actors, they went on tape, which famous people do not do. Famous people say, make me an offer. Call my agent, make an offer, and I'll read your script. And Jim went on tape, and Cusack went on tape, and Ed Norton went on tape, and Kevin Spacey.
Nick Cage.
Here's a great. So everyone wanted to play this part. This is a funny story. So our casting director, Francine Maisler, is a genius. She's the best. And Francine calls us up one day. She says, I got a phone call from a guy with a weird British accent who says he's Gary Oldman. And he thinks he's the best person to play the part. And we're thinking, Gary Oldman, it's like, what a bad idea. He's a good actor, but he's really not funny, and he's kind of surly, and he's got an accent. And she's like, yeah, I just don't even get that one. All right, so let's talk about Nick Cage and Jim Carrey again. We're like, yeah. And then a few days later, it's like, he called again, and he's really angry that we won't send him the script. And so she calls up Milos, and Milos is like, yes, of course. Let us see what Gary has to offer us. I mean, Milos is always like, sure, whatever. Let's hear about it. Knock yourself out. So she sends, and now the studio is like hearing about this. Like, what do you mean Gary Oldman's going to be playing? We thought you were going to get Jim Carrey, the world's biggest star. So the script goes to England, and then a couple weeks later, Francine calls up. She says, I got a tape from England. We're like, what? So we run over to Francine's office, and Francine's all excited, and she puts it on. And it's this guy in shadows. And he's doing Great Gatsby, he's doing routines from the movie, but you can't really see his face. And we're like, what is this? This is so amateur and terrible. It's like, and then like a light turns on, and it's not Gary Oldman. It's an imposter. We're like, whoa, we got scammed. It's like it was totally in the spirit of the movie.
That actor became Benedict Cumberbatch. No.
Exactly.
We have a question on the balcony.
Hi. I've seen Big Eyes and the People versus O.J. Simpson. I like your work. I'm wondering, since you said you generally tend to become experts in like the people you're making movies about, and you kind of try to stick to the truth even if you might change up the order a bit. Have any of the people...
However.
You liars. Go ahead, sorry.
I was not about to criticize anything. I'm just wondering, have any of the people, involved in, the real stories behind the movies, have they ever gotten like upset at something in that was portrayed in the movie? And if so, what was it?
No, actually, we're very proud of the fact that even people who are worried about what's going to be portrayed, we've always kind of won them over. That like Margaret Keane and Big Eyes is a good example of that. She was worried that the film would still, people would still think Walter was the painter even after they saw the film. And Marsha Clark's another person who was actually really terrified that we were going to go after her, and we certainly didn't. It was like a big, really, almost like this weight came off her shoulders. The only, there are cases, something like the Goldman family and OJ. They just didn't want they just didn't want it brought up again. They didn't want to have to go through that whole thing again. But we never met with them or anything like that. And there's a very small part of the thing. But they're kind of the only people I can think of off the top of my head that were not happy that the project was.
This movie tonight, Andy's dad was still alive when the movie came out, and he thought we focused on Andy's negativity too much. And he said he wished we had more of the high school stuff when he was young and friendly and sweet. And we were just like, Stanley, we got to get to Jim Carrey. And if he's still a kid, it's a different actor. And so we can't have more of those early moments. And so I felt bad about that, but it was just a different point of view. He's his father.
Yeah. He thought that Zamuda brainwashed us.
Oh yeah, he thought Zamuda's evil.
Yeah.
We think Zamuda's really funny.
I have a question, back of house left.
Okay.
Hi. I remember Andy Kaufman's celebrity at the time, and I somewhat disagree with your characterization of him as an obscure person. But I think Jim Carrey did a terrific job portraying him. My question is, was it the over on your left? My question is whether it was your decision as writers or Milos Forman's decision as the director to not include, maybe at the end, any actual footage of Andy Kaufman to kind of show what a great job Jim Carrey did and to show Andy himself.
I mean, we don't mean he was obscure, particularly at the time. Obviously, he was a big enough star, but 20 years had gone by since he had passed away when we made the film, and there was no books written on him or anything like that. So his pop culture moment had kind of gone by.
He was really only remembered for Taxi at that point.
Yeah. I don't think Milos ever talked about putting
No.
real faces in there. I don't know if we've done that.
No, I don't.
We do.
I guess Dolomite.
Dolomite
we
definitely
did it.
does it. Dolomite definitely does it. And does OJ do it?
OJ.
We have that 10th episode has a lot of.
Oh, those
whatever
cards.
happened to. I mean, we don't really like those cards at the end of a lot of biopics, but sometimes, like when you do test screenings, audience insist upon them. They kind of like they're instantly like, what happened to that person? What happened to that person? So almost to give some kind of satisfaction. It often ends up having to do that.
Yeah, I don't have a real need to see the real Andy in the movie because I feel like it's sort of taking away from what Jim did. I mean, when the movie came out, we would talk to people and they would sort of be interested in wanting to know more about Andy. I would always send them Lynn, the real Lynn, made a great doc called "I'm From Hollywood" about his wrestling era.
Yeah.
And I would always send people to that one.
And it's funny, most of our screenplays have been, also exist as books that have been published. And usually in those books, we have a section of photographs that tends to be the real George Shapiro and Danny DeVito. And people do enjoy that section of the books because they get to see how the actors transformed into the real people.
I think, to your point, I think Milos's way of sort of honoring Andy was he snuck Andy's granddaughter into the movie. Andy had knocked up a girl after high school, and then so many years had passed that she had had a child. So that's who played Andy's little sister in the movie. So we had like a little family connection there. And Andy's dad, Stanley, is in the movie. He's at Mighty Mouse. He's sitting behind a guy playing him.
It gets very confusing when you look at it.
I have a question, center left, all the way to the back, please.
Can you tell us about the decisions for the closing shot? Was this something that you had decided early on?
We love the closing shot so much, and this was the only time we've ever known the closing shot before we wrote a script. We always knew the closing shot is Tony Clifton, and then we pan to the audience and we see Zamuda sitting in the crowd. We always wanted to end the movie this way. Here's a cute production story. So this is a really weird movie. And Universal was really supportive. They loved the movie, and the dailies were great, and Jim's great. And somewhere during production, they said, we're going to release it Christmas Day. And we're like, Christmas Day? This is really, this is not a movie where you take grandma and the kids and you pack up the station wagon. This is not a feel-good movie. This is a weird story. And they're like, no, and they're going to put like a lot of money behind it getting released, and they're all excited. So they schedule a test screening in Danbury, Connecticut. And we all fly to Danbury, Connecticut, and we do this, and it's just a bomb. It's just, people hate this movie. Because if you don't know, if you come in unprepared, you just think you're seeing a Jim Carrey comedy. And Andy is like giving you the finger, and the movie's giving you the finger. So then everyone fixated on that last shot, because the last shot is emblematic of the problems with this movie, because the last shot makes you uncomfortable and uncertain. And we go, yes, as Andy would have wished it. We want people to walk to their cars and go, what do you think happened in the end? Wait, is he alive? Wait, what are they saying? Oh, we want people debating it the way Andy wanted you debating it. And then some genius had the idea, like, well, you know what? We go to the audience and they're laughing, and there's a pan. Oh, wait, no, we dolly pass a column, and then we dolly pass another column, and there's Zamuda, and then we dolly over to the Andy Kaufman neon sign. And they go, wait a minute, we could just cut out that piece of Zamuda and put the two columns together, and he won't be in the room. And we're like, what? So it'll just be a cut to the crowd, and then it's Andy Kaufman neon, and it's a feel-good ending.
It's his best friend coming out and carrying on the legacy.
So now by doing that lift, now the editing has now changed the meaning of the whole scene. Now it's Zamuda on stage. And we're saying, what? This is but that's not what we want.
But it worked. It really did work.
Yeah, and so it was a lot of fighting, and we had test screenings with both endings. Oh my God. We've had movies with dueling test screenings. It's ridiculous. And of course, the ending without Zamuda in the audience tested 5 points higher because it's not giving you the finger at the end, but it's not as good. So, but I think I was really angry about this. You were not as angry. You were like, that's fine, that's fine.
Right, but it was actually one of those things. It was a weird experiment where it did still work, and it was basically the truth because that was Zamuda at the end. But
so Milos, during the production of the movie, his girlfriend who became his wife, Martina, got pregnant, and she gave birth to 2 twins. And Milos was so invested in the movie, he named his twins Jim and Andy. And
I actually said to him, don't you want to wait to see how the movie comes out before you do that? Let's see if it's a hit or if people like it. Maybe you should think about that.
So this could be my proudest Hollywood moment. So I was really angry about this. And so it's like one day we're like in the cutting room and Milos is showing us like the version with it and the version without it. I was like, I don't know, maybe, possibly, it could be, And I walked away with Milos and I said, I'm gonna ask you a question. When Jim and Andy are old enough to see this movie, which ending do you want them to see? And he was just like, oh, Alexander, oh, and I won. I played the baby card.
That's what I don't like about him. He does that kind of shit.
But come on, Larry, seeing it tonight, how great is that ending?
It's great.
The ending is awesome.
It's great.
I have a question, front center.
Hi, I'm Maddie. My best friend Allie and I, out of college, we've also sort of, like you guys, become a screenwriting duo, directing, producing, acting as well. So clearly you guys have been doing this for a very long time together, and we sort of wanted to know what advice you would have for young emerging duos like us, the things you love about working together, challenges you've had over the years. Give us the 411 on all that.
Go.
Well, that's such a gigantic question. We're like, hey, we want to write, act, direct, and star in movies and as a duo. What do you want us to do? It sounds like you're well on your way already. I can reflect on the writing advice I would get is what we tell young writers when we meet them is write the movie you want to see. Don't write the movie that you think the studio wants or whatever. Just write the movie that if you saw the ad for it somewhere, or you'd be like, oh my God, I can't wait to see that movie. So you're actually doing something where it's a variation on right from your heart, but it's not as sappy as that. It's sort of like if you're excited by cinema, you're excited by what you guys want to do. It's like write the thing that obviously Scott and I very much write the shit that we want to see, that we think is funny. You know what I mean? And it's like the way Andy, there's that scene where they're like, it's only funny to you two guys, and we think it's hysterical. That's us. And so for you guys, write the thing that you think is hysterical.
Do you remember what attracted you to each other? How did you know I mean, you did know that you were going to have this longevity, but how did you know that you wanted to work together? What was it about, out of all the other people in film school with you, that pulled you two together? Do you
Scott's the first person I knew who had a personal computer. So he actually had a computer. And so it sort of changed everything. He had a computer and
128 kilobytes.
And that computer is now in the Academy Museum on display.
If anyone comes to Los Angeles, a K-Pro 2X.
Yes.
You can see it on display.
Yes, floppy disks and things like this. And so because back in film school, back in the day, you did not write an entire screenplay. You wrote the first 30 pages or you did an outline. And because Scott now had this piece of equipment, we're like, hey, maybe we can get to the end. We could actually write a screenplay on the computer. And we came up with a really funny idea.
We came up with the idea very close to here in South Bend.
Yes, we did.
I was driving cross country we were all roommates with another friend, and there was a series of Ann Landers columns.
Yeah.
Remember Ann Landers? What? Yeah. What?
Well, she's responsible for our career.
She's responsible for us. Oh my God! What? Look at this. We have this bond here, Ann Landers.
Changed all three of our lives.
Wow. So it basically was a terrible story about a horrible thing that happened. And when the friend and we drove cross country and we got to South Bend, I told Larry about all these Ann Landers columns, and I was laughing. Yeah. And we started riffing on it. We're like, well, that's not really funny, but if it were Albert Brooks and Morris Day, now that's funny. And we basically started doing shtick. And then when we all got back to LA a few weeks later, the two of us started saying, well, maybe this could be a movie. So we just kind of backed into it. We didn't set out we didn't even think we were going to write a script. It just happened because of Ann Landers.
I have the last question. Center back, please.
Hi, I'm a big fan. I was just wondering,
who's Ann Landers?
Sorry.
Who do you like better, Ann Landers or Dear Abby?
Sorry. I was just wondering, when you're writing your
people will heckle the questionnaire.
When you're writing your scripts, do you have a specific actor or actresses that you love to play the people that you write about, or do you just leave it open to your interpretation?
Well, what's funny is because we're writing about real people, we tend to have the real people in mind. I don't think we tended to think of actors. Did we ever think we tend to always think of the person who exists.
Well, when we wrote our first movie, Problem Child, we were both fond of this old character actor, Jack Warden. And when we used to play out the part of Big Ben in the script, as we were acting out we're both bad actors, and we would just do our Jack Warden impressions. And then Jack Warden got cast, and he got to play the part. Yeah. It was so great because he had all the rhythms right because we kind of written them for him.
And Scott was correct when he mentioned earlier our first script. We actually just named the characters Albert Brooks and Morris Day because we thought it would be funny if they were in a movie together. That tells you the exact year that we wrote that script. And I think maybe the only person sometimes we thought of when we were writing Larry Flint, we had just worked with Bill Murray on Ed Wood. Yeah. And we thought maybe Bill Murray would be the perfect Larry Flint because Larry Flint would often say things that you just weren't, does he believe in what he's saying, or is he trying to cause trouble? Is he trying to be funny? And Bill Murray is that kind of person. You go to lunch with Bill Murray, and he'll say something to you, and you don't know how you're supposed to even react to it. And we thought he'd make a great Larry Flint, but he actually didn't return Milosh's calls. He just went off the grid.
So we didn't use him.
I think that was it. I think that was the last question. Thank you, gentlemen.
Give us our thumbs.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. And thank you, Chaz. Thank you,
Chaz,
for everything you do. Thank you for making this happen. We love you.
We have raffle winners we have to announce. And
win a date with Scott.
I would like, Scott, can you see? I don't have my glasses. Will you read the raffle winner, please?
Oh, I have my glasses.
Okay.
Who has glasses? Does someone in this house have glasses?
If anyone
Larry has
watched
some.
Blackmail this morning, I love the scene where the lady took out her glasses and spent like a minute and a half just putting them on. Let's see.
I can. It's this
They're
person.
They're two different
It's
winners.
somebody who lives in Galesburg. I can read that.
It is M. Volkers. M. Volkers,
M.
your winner!
Are you here?
Okay. Is he here? And I'm going to give out M. Volker's phone number so
Okay.
everyone can just call
And then the second winner is.
Oh boy.
There
Oh boy.
too.
Oh, sorry. Take this one back. Oh my God! It's Sugar Burgers. Sugar Burgers? Is that really a person's name? That's a stripper friend of mine. Sugar Burgers.
Susan.
Now known as Sugar, exactly. Sugar Burgers. Woo! Woo! Yeah, is it Burgess? Burgess? Suzanne Burgess? Suzanne Burgess? I don't know. Hey, I mean, if you're there, I'll be right there. She's right there.
Everybody up here is blind.
I need my spectacles. All right, we'll find it.
Is this other person here? Is Susan here?
All right. Does anyone pretend to be Susan and get it?
Who wants to be Susan?
I am Sugar.